Hello everyone, welcome to English 130. And for the purpose of this video, we are going to go over our second assignment, 1-2. That's our reading response, interviewing the text. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're in the correct module. This week we are in module 1, and we want to scroll down until we get to that assignment. It's right here, 1-2, reading response, interviewing the text. So to get to an assignment like this, you want to click on the blue text and it will open up for you. This is where you would actually submit the assignment, but in order to read the guidelines in the rubric, you would click right here. And if you notice, again, we've got a hyperlink. Okay, so now it's nice and open for us, and we have our Module 1 reading response guidelines and rubric. Now, ideally, before we get here, we should have already looked at our Module 1 introduction, we should have already looked at our Module 1 guide, and we should have also done our reading that's in our Module 1 resources, where we have our textbook chapters that are assigned, any videos that might be assigned, as well as the articles that we have to choose from to complete the Module 1 reading response. So for the Module 1 reading response guidelines, we have an overview here. It just says that for this assignment, you're going to choose a text that will be used for the basis of your project in this class. So you have a project that you're going to complete in Module 7, but you'll be slowly doing things to get you to that point, and everything will center on the text you choose. So I urge you to choose a text that you feel comfortable with, one that you enjoy, one that you understand well, okay? You're going to be working with this text, and in this guide, it's going to help you identify key aspects of the text. These key aspects and concepts are things that are going to continue to come up, so it's really important that as you explore them in Module 1, that you don't forget about them, and as you go, don't forget about your resources and your chapters, and don't be afraid to revisit those resources, especially if you still have questions about these key concepts that we'll be exploring here in Module 1. So it says, specifically, this assignment will prepare you to identify the topic of the text, describe the writer's purpose, determine the historical or cultural context, identify the core idea, and identify details of the text that are relevant to the core idea. So I really want to bring your attention to terms that are going to be very important as we move through this course. Topic is going to come up again. Writer's purpose is something you're going to hear again. We're going to talk more about historical context, cultural context. Core idea is going to be repeated. Details. Another thing you'll hear, genre. So I want you to think about these words and make sure that you are keeping these terms in mind as you work through this module and the ones that follow. Directions. So it says, first review the article selection of this week's resources. Remember, I discussed those, and you're going to choose one article to use as the text for this assignment and the project. Next, explain why you chose the text. Then address the prompts related to content, genre, purpose, context, that's historical and cultural context, core idea, and details of the text using the template linked in the What to Submit section. So then it just tells you what you need to address. Number 1, choose the text you use for your project, and then you need to explain why you chose it. There are no right answers here, so you really want to talk about what interests you about the text. What did you find intriguing? Is there a personal connection to the text? Is this something that maybe you needed? Did you find that you were an ideal audience for this text? Number 2, identify the topic of the text. That's very simple. What's the text about? What's the subject of the text? Number 3, identify the genre of the text. What genre do you think the text was written in? So when we talk about genre, we're categorizing our text. And a lot of times we think of genre when we think of books we read, right? For example, I enjoy horror books, and that's a very sometimes strange and overlooked genre, but it's a type, right, or category of fiction that some people enjoy, right? The same with these articles. They're going to fit in a certain genre. It might be informational text. It might be self help. It might be business writing. So, as you read your chapters and explore your resources, you will learn more about genre. So, I urge you to look for these terms in your reading. And as you read, do all of your resources, do all of the strategies that you're going to learn in the guide. Take notes, highlight important things, circle interesting concepts or concepts that stand out, ask questions, okay? Number 4, describe the writer's purpose. This is a really good one. Why do you think the writer wrote it? So when you are exploring writer's purpose, you want to figure out what was the writer's motivation for writing this text? Did he or she or they write the text to entertain? Did they write it to inform someone? Did they write it to explain? Did they write it to persuade? Okay. Number 5, determine the historical context of the text. What do you think the text's historical context is? Number 6, determine the cultural context of the text. What do you think the text's cultural context is? Number 7, identify the core idea of the text. And number 8, identify details of the text that are relevant to core idea. And it even has a note here. What are 2 to 4 places in the text that support the core idea? So something I want to go back to is historical and cultural context. Now, if that's something you've never heard of before, you are in luck because the class is filled with this information and things that will help you with your assignments. So if you're stuck and you want to know what historical context is or what cultural context is, all you have to do is go back in your chapter. So I'm going to urge you to go in your module 1 and look here in your guide. This information is either in your guide or in your resources. These are the 2 places you can go for information that you need. If you come across a term or concept in your assignment that you don't understand, I'm going to bet you my last dollar that it's somewhere in this module for you. Okay, so we're going to check the module 1 guide first, even though we already read it before we got here. And we're going to look, and there you are. You have identifying historical context, and then you have identifying cultural context. So I urge you to make sure that as you go through these modules, you always look at your introduction, you always look at your guide, and you always check your resources and complete your textbook chapter readings, as well as any videos or any additional supplemental resources that are provided in the resource section. So let's quickly talk about historical context. What is historical context? Historical context is the moment in time that pertains to the reading. For example, an article about the year MTV was born that was written in 1980 has a different historical context than an article on the same topic written today. Isn't that the truth? When reading a story, the historical context is also the time in which the story is set. When you read, look for clues when the article was written. However, within the article, you might notice historical context through references to technological advances, popular culture, icons, political leaders, or major historical events. And all that's saying is, in most articles, it's not going to read the historical context is England, 1952. You're going to have to look in the reading for clues sometimes to give you hints to what the historical context is. And so, for example, if you're reading an article that discusses VCRs and the advent of cable television, then you could guess the historical context is probably going to be somewhere in the 80s, okay? Popular cultural icons. Popular cultural icons or people that are famous during a certain time can give you hints about historical context. Same with major historical events. If the Civil War is mentioned, that gives you a huge clue as to when this is set, right? Okay, so anyway, key questions when you're trying to determine historical context include when was this text written and what was the world like at that time that might be different from how our world is now, right? Because remember, historical context can help you put the article's core idea in context, right? Things are going to mean something different in a certain setting, whereas it could mean something completely different if it's set in the present day. So we just want to make sure that we're mindful of historical context and how that can affect core idea and how that can affect the needs and expectations of the audience or even the writer's purpose, okay? And then when we're identifying cultural context, we want to think about who the article is about, okay? An article about college students, for example, who live in dorms has a cultural context much different from an article about fully online college students. So basically, if historical context is about the when something takes place, cultural context is about who, right? Who is the article about? So when you think historical context, think when. When you think cultural context, think who. Okay. Key questions include who is this text written by? Who is this text about? And what do you notice about the background and perspective of the author? Because that's information that can give you clues as to the cultural context of a text. Okay. So, with that being said, let's go back to our assignment here. So, Module 1-2, Reading Response Guidelines and Rubric, it gives us our directions, which we've already discussed here. So, these are all things that you're going to be asked and you're going to be asked to respond to. And then you want to do that on our template. So, for every assignment, you will be given a template to work on. If it says module 1, 2, 3, 4 template, you want to click it and you want to use it. That means that you will click this template. You will open it and you will type inside of this template to do your work. And then you will save it and then upload it to me or submit it to me through the link. So you notice it's got the SNU logo here. It's got the name of the assignment and it has questions. Here it says insert text. Feel free to delete these brackets here. Brackets are just this symbol here. Okay, we want to delete those brackets. And then we want to begin typing. The topic of XYZ is. You want to make sure that when you write your answers, you write them in complete sentences and that you make sure that you restate some part of the question. So here, when it says identify the topic of the text, good practice would be the topic of, mention the text, the name of the text is such and such, whatever the topic is, okay? So that's really important. We want to make sure that we do our template here. In an announcement that I have posted for you guys, I will attach the template to that. And then we also have an exemplar. So what this is just a student sample so that you have some idea of what a good copy of this assignment looks like. You always want to view these because it gives you an idea of what the teacher, me, is looking for, as well as the writing style that you sort of need to model. Okay. So I'm going to click this here. And we're going to open this up. Okie dokie. Okay. So here we are. So if you notice, it's the same thing that we saw in the template, except we have an answer here, right? So it just says this article is about XYZ. That's another way to do it too. You don't always have to say the topic of the text is. You could say this article discusses, this article states, this article is mostly about XYZ, okay? The genre of the text, you have an answer here. Describe author's purpose, historical context, cultural, and so on. So before you complete your assignment, I ask that you take the time to always look at the exemplar. And what's awesome about this class is that you will never be given an assignment like this without an example or sample to look at, okay? So I think that's fantastic because you have sort of a roadmap to follow. And then we have our Module 1 reading response rubric. This is simply what I will use to grade you on this assignment. If you notice the why here, when we explain why the text was chosen, that's worth 15 points. Identifying the topic is worth 10 points, right? And you can be scored in different areas. You can be scored as either proficient, which means you 100% did what I asked. Needs improvement means you're on the right track, but maybe there are some errors or some omissions. And not evident means you did not try to do what's being asked here. And so we have that all the way down. And if you notice, there's also a box for clear communication. So that just means that if you write in a way that's clear and easy to understand, you're going to earn your 10 points here, and the total is 100. So that concludes the information on Module 1 reading response. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to write a post on our general discussion forum, or you can send me an email and I'll be happy to get back to you. Have a fantastic first week, and I am so happy to have you here.